The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's not a frequent occurrence that I'm at a loss for words. I usually have words, or at least I can come up with a few to sort of throw at you through my microphone every single day. But I really sort of don't know how to introduce this first story today to you. I mean, never mind how to analyze it, right? But even how to tell you about it. Saturday, Donald Trump said that he had a phone call with an official from the North Korean Security Council. The call was actually with the South Korean president, Moon Jae-in. Does Trump not know that he spoke to the South Korean president and he thought he was talking to someone from North Korea? Did he make up the entire thing? Does this connect to the story about dementia, or is it a story about lying or of confusion and incompetence? Donald Trump told the story. They called up a couple of days ago. We would like to talk. And I said, so would we, but you've got to de-nuke. You have to de-nuke. Of course, that was a phone call not with the North Korean Security Council official, but with the South Korean president, who, as far as the world knows, doesn't have nuclear weapons. And later, we heard confirmation that the president did not have a phone call with North Koreans, but apparently was characterizing his phone call with the South Korean president. So first of all, one possibility is Trump doesn't know the difference between the leaders of North and South Korea. That would be grounds for removing him from office, right? If he's on the phone thinking he's doing diplomacy with North Korea and he's talking to the South Korean president, that would be immediate grounds for dismissal for the president. Number two, South Korea doesn't have nuclear weapons that we know of. If on the phone Trump is referring to you really have to de-nuke and he's talking to Moon Jae-in, either Moon Jae-in thinks this guy's incompetent, which would be accurate, or if on the off chance that South Korea has some kind of secret stash of nuclear weapons, Moon Jae-in thinks, wow, the gig is up. Donald Trump, somehow this is the guy who has figured out that we're actually hiding nuclear weapons. Unless South Korea is secretly a nuclear state, then there are real problems here. And then the other possibility, which I sort of alluded to before, could Trump have made up the entire thing? That he said he spoke to North Korean officials, but he really didn't speak to anyone? Like he literally just concocted the entire thing out of thin air? And then, of course, lastly, it's the possibility of dementia, which is no, during the call, Trump did know he was talking to the South Korean president, Moon Jae-in. He later remembered the conversation as having been with an official from the North Korean Security Council, where he said that they've got to get rid of their nukes. That, shockingly, the most charitable explanation from this that I gather would be it's dementia and Trump was okay during the call, but just can't remember what the hell went on. Because all of the others are either incompetence to a degree that justifies removal from the office of president, or number two, absolute and total fabrication of a phone call that never took place. My hope is that there was no call at all, right? My hope is that the phone on Donald Trump's desk in the Oval Office has been replaced with one that only rings in the next room over, and people in the White House are sort of acting and playing roles so that Trump thinks he's actually talking to world leaders and somebody else is actually handling the conversations with world leaders. And the part that hasn't been reported here is that Trump's confusion was actually that he thought he was on the phone with a Chinese restaurant and he couldn't understand why Moon Jae-in just would not give him the crab rangoons. And he was very, very visibly angry after this. I'm begging for the transcript, right? If the phone call took place, I want to see where Donald Trump supposedly said to Moon Jae-in of South Korea, which doesn't have nuclear weapons, that they need to de-nuke. And we also have to consider that other option that I mentioned before, which is there was no call at all with anybody from either Korea, and Trump made the entire thing up. And then again, it would be one of those demonstrably falsifiable lies of sort of only passing political benefit that we wonder, why would somebody be stupid or narcissistic enough to even lie about that? The bad news just doesn't stop for this administration. We now have top economic advisor Gary Cohn resigning. He is not some intern who would get coffee for Donald Trump. Gary Cohn is the head of the National Economic Council. This is the #1 economic advisor to the President of the United States. Asked why Gary Cohn is resigning, the White House said, there's no one reason, but of course, even an 8-year-old could identify that Trump announces 25% tariff on steel, 10% tariff on aluminum, disastrous economically, and then immediately the top economic advisor resigns. Most likely not a coincidence, although of course correlation is not causation. And then we later found out from the New York Times that Gary Cohn had actually warned last week that if Trump goes through with these tariffs, he might be out. That might be him riding into the sunset. And I was laughing to myself when I read this. Trump was going to drain the swamp, right? Cohn is one of the swamp investment bankers that wasn't going to be part of the administration to begin with. Trump is finally draining the swamp by being so insufferable to work with that people he's hired are quitting. That's the only way in which it could be reasonably be argued that Donald Trump is doing any draining of the swamp. And the line from Trumpists on this, the cognitive dissonance is just stunning. The Trumpists are saying, listen, Gary Cohn was basically a Democrat, almost always for free trade. He just didn't really have a place in this great administration that's making America great again. But the bigger picture is that this is now a really long list of people who have left, people in serious roles with the Trump administration. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, indicted. Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, propagandist, pushed out, presumably, by Chief of Staff John Kelly. Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn is now resigning. Multiple communications directors, including Anthony Scaramucci, most recently Hope Hicks, the neo-Nazi connected Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka, Dr. Gorka, as Sean Hannity lovingly refers to him on his new job at Fox News. Deputy National Security Advisor K.T. McFarland, Rob Porter, we talked about in the last couple of weeks, Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, and these are just some of the big names. There are several dozen other smaller roles, and then, of course, hundreds of unfilled positions, which I've told you about before. The official turnover number right now for the Trump administration is 43%. 43% of this core group of positions under the purview of the Oval Office, under the purview of the president, have already turned over. And we are, March 14 months in, not even 14 months into this administration. Shrinking government, I guess, is how you would defend this. People are just going away. They don't want anything to do with the government, so Trump is operating under the pretense of smaller government. Still also a very long list of upcoming potential resignations. Jared Kushner, I don't know if it's going to be resignation or indictment or someone just saying it's time for you to get the hell out because you're only causing problems. We also have been hearing multiple reports that Michael Flynn's replacement, the new National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, is preparing to resign. We'll see. Rumors about Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's possible resignation still haven't gone away, even though clearly hasn't happened yet. And then even the elegant Chief of Staff, John Kelly's name keeps coming up. If we believe the reports, Kelly has been on the verge of, or sort of, he was on the other side of an ultimatum of resigning. And I don't remember exactly what the issues were that got Kelly basically in a position of, if you do this, I will have to go. I think maybe something related to Rob Porter, although now I'm not exactly remembering. The list of people who are arguably close to resignation is a pretty big list. I'm wondering, are the best people Trump was going to hire the people that are leaving, or the people that Trump will now have the opportunity to hire because of all the resignations that have taken place? I don't know. And I want to take a slightly different view on these resignations. I've not heard anybody make this comment before. mostly because I don't watch any TV shows or listen to any radio shows. So maybe people have made this comment and I've missed it. If you didn't resign after Trump said that there were very fine people on both sides of a neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, Virginia over the summer, your morality is questionable. Your motivations are questionable and your integrity is questionable. In other words, once Trump said that there are very fine neo-Nazis when there was a horrible show of violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, to hear that and say, I'm going to continue working for this man, that in and of itself is the red flag for me.
Yeah, Gary Cohn was actually thinking about resigning after the Charlottesville comments.
Oh, was he? I didn't know that.
But he didn't pull through with it. So I don't know if that's a good reflection on him or a bad reflection on him, because at least he considered it.
Well, I guess if we're kind of ranking these guys, considering resigning is better than not considering it, but actually resigning is even better than that. I don't know. And so I think that he's a half step above some of these others in that it occurred to him, maybe this isn't somebody that I want to be working for. And I assume Gary Cohn is Jewish from his last name. It seems particularly rancid to be working for a guy who is out there saying there are really very fine people amongst a group that certainly is not pro-Jewish. I don't even know what the word is that I would use. In terms of building an understanding of the Trump philosophy to the extent that it exists, this is kind of a sign of a purity test, right? And that's a common trait of authoritarian leaders. You only have people working for you who are completely and totally loyal to you in all ways, all the time. And as soon as there's a disagreement, and here it was Gary Cohn saying, I don't think these tariffs are a good idea, he's out. And meanwhile, Trump is insisting that things are just great at the White House, tweeting recently, the new fake news narrative is that there is chaos in the White House. Wrong. People will always come and go, and I want strong dialogue before making a final decision. I still have some people that I want to change, always seeking perfection. Hint, more resignation soon. There is no chaos, capital C chaos, only great energy, capital E for energy. It's sort of funny in a sad way that Trump thinks everybody wants to work with him, and yet almost half of his staff has left, 43% turnover rate, as I told you. I imagine the analogy I have is the little kid that nobody wants to play with, sitting in the sandbox, building moats to keep all the other kids out, who of course don't exist. None of the kids are trying to get into that sandbox. That's sort of what Trump is here.
Yeah, and soon there won't be chaos in the White House at this rate.
There won't be anybody left.
That's because nobody will be working there.
Yeah, it'll be just Trump and Yvonne. I don't even know who will be left.
Maybe not even
at this
Trump.
Point. Maybe not even Trump himself. Yeah, it'll be an empty Oval Office. It'll be Mar-a-Lago, the Mar-a-Lagoization of the presidency. Send me your thoughts. Who's going to go next? That's actually what I'd love to hear from you. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. Show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. Boy, do we have a long-form piece for you coming up later today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is David Fadak. David, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. We're mostly funded by members like David. And I also want to thank a very special sustaining member who's been with us since July of 2011, Paul Leary. Paul Leary, thank you. You are coming up on your 7-year anniversary of membership, and it's because of both our long-term members and our new members like David and Paul that we continue to grow. And right now, you can get a free David Pakman Show bumper sticker in either black or white format with a new yearly membership, which you can get at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also save 40% on the membership of your choice if you use the coupon code VOTESOON18. And if you want to do something simpler, lighter weight, you can make a pledge of as little as $1 per month at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All sorts of ways to support the program. All right, it's Hatriot Mail. I have yet another new Hatriot Mail tagline or new introduction to present to you, sort of in the interests of keeping Hatriot Mail timely. Take a listen to this.
Hey, let's face it. The only logical response to guns is more f***ing guns. Hatriot Mail. written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Okay, there is something very different about this week's Hatriot Mail, and I'm not going to give away what it is. I'm going to play the Hatriot Mail for you and see if you can figure out what just seems a little bit different about this week's Hatriot Mail.
David is more of a Hispano-kike. His parents probably killed the innocent babies of several Roman Catholic Gentiles in Argentina and were subsequently deported to the land of the free, where it's okay to feast on the progeny of Gentiles, so long as you have enough money and influence.
What do you think? What do you think was different about that Hatriot Mail versus many, many others? It's incredibly well written.
Yeah.
The content is completely depraved and disgusting, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, anti-Hispanic, but it's quite well constructed as far as the English language goes.
Yeah, I'm used to deranged Hatriot Mails,
yes,
but not eloquent ones.
Absolutely. This may be the best ever written, the best written Hatriot Mail that we have ever had. And the good news is that whether Hatriot Mail is well written or poorly written, you can give a middle finger salute to the Hatriots by using the coupon code Hatriot40 to get a 40% discount off of any membership, whatever membership you like, at davidpakman.com/membership. Hatriot40 as a coupon code will save you 40%. We finally heard confirmation that Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway broke the law. She violated the Hatch Act at least twice when she advocated for and against candidates during that special election in late 2017 in Alabama between Doug Jones and Roy Moore. Ultimately, Doug Jones, the winner there. And the Office of the Special Counsel, which is not the same thing as Robert Mueller, okay? Office of the Special Counsel is a different office, put out a report, and they said, yeah, when Kellyanne Conway, advisor to the president, counselor to the president, appeared on television in her official capacity as White House advisor, one time on CNN, one time on Fox News, she mixed official government business and political views about candidates, which you were not allowed to do. And the Office of the Special Counsel is advising Donald Trump that there should be disciplinary action. Good luck with that. The maximum possible penalty would be dismissal from her job and a fine of 2 years' salary. And of course, Trump isn't going to do that, I can't imagine. And the White House has responded saying, we just don't agree. We don't believe she broke the law. They said she was just there expressing the position of the president, which is that Doug Jones was not a good candidate and that Roy Moore was the good candidate. And the two examples include one on Fox and Friends, where she was introduced by the show's hosts as the counselor to President Trump. She was at the White House during the interview, and she said about Doug Jones, who was the Democratic candidate down in Alabama, folks, don't be fooled. He'll be a vote against tax cuts. He's weak on crime, weak on borders. He's strong on raising your taxes. He's terrible for property owners. Now, the stunning thing is when I first read the headline, Kellyanne Conway violated the Hatch Act, I didn't even think that it had to do with her comments about the Alabama special election. You might remember that we covered when Kellyanne Conway went on Fox News as the counselor to the president and promoted Ivanka Trump's clothing line, which also arguably is a misuse of that public position to promote a private business, which, by the way, is a business that is connected to the guy who's sitting in the Oval Office. No repercussions there. And I'm not even really expecting repercussions now either. As I mentioned, at the harshest, the penalty would be she loses her job and she's fined 2 years' pay. But since Trump doesn't fill positions, the board that would decide about Conway's punishment doesn't have enough people to reach a quorum. So literally, we don't have enough people appointed by Trump to the board that would decide what Kellyanne Conway's punishment would be. And of course, separate from that, Trump can choose to say that she's got to leave her role at any time that he wants. People saying she really didn't break the law because the worst possible penalty is firing and fined, No. She broke the law. It's just that the law is really weak and the maximum punishment is really, really weak. It's so funny when people go and they say, well, okay, if she broke the law, how much jail time could she do? Well, she can't do any jail time because the maximum penalty is dismissal from her role and a 2-year salary fine. Oh, so it's not like she really broke the law. No, she broke the law. There's just almost no penalty for breaking this law.
And yeah, when you think about it, she's the third Trump campaign manager to break the law in some way. Corey Lewandowski was arrested for assaulting a reporter.
But now, what
Paul
was
Manafort was indicted on 12 counts.
How did the Lewandowski thing end up? I don't know.
I think he went unscathed eventually.
He settled or something like that, right? Yeah, I think eventually it was dismissed.
Paul Manafort not so much though. He's in trouble.
No, so even still, I would say she is the third campaign manager to at least be accused of having committed a crime. And then, of course, whether these things get settled or whether Manafort will do jail time or whatever, I guess we'll wait and see. And listen, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is spot on with her response. She already said Obama once wore a tan suit, and another time he had Dijon mustard, and there was no punishment. Nobody cared at all, and nobody should care about this because it's of no importance whatsoever. Let's talk about Texas. I like Texas, at least Austin, which is the only place I've been, which I think is actually not really representative of what Texas is, but that's maybe a story for another day. The good news today is that Democrat Beto O'Rourke won the Democratic primary in Texas yesterday. He is now officially facing Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz in the November election. So good opportunity to talk about Texas, good opportunity to talk about Ted Cruz, and a very good opportunity to talk about O'Rourke, who we haven't really talked about that much. First of all, huge Democratic primary turnout in Texas. We're going to talk about that more on the bonus show. We'll discuss whether this is a sign of the blue wave that some of our callers have been inquiring about, Democratic voter engagement, how this impacts the Turn Texas Blue project. It's a very good thing, but a lot of that conversation we're going to have on the bonus show today. Number two, Ted Cruz. Beto O'Rourke is now officially the opposition to Ted Cruz in Ted Cruz's reelection campaign. Cruz is without a doubt one of the most disgusting and depraved senators in the United States. Horrible religious ideologue, wrong on policy on just about every issue. So Cruz out would be a tremendous accomplishment as a result of the upcoming midterm elections. That gets us to Beto O'Rourke. What can I say about Beto O'Rourke? I know that a lot of people in our audience love the guy. He is a solid Democratic candidate, particularly in Texas. But I think it's important when these pseudo love affairs start with candidates like Beto O'Rourke, we need to recognize that he's not really a progressive hero of the working class, right? His big thing, and he's gotten a lot of PR because he doesn't take super PAC financing. And that's a good thing. I'm against super PAC financing. He has the right position on that. That being said, about 60% of Beto O'Rourke's donations, you can check it out on Open Secrets, are from large donors. And the large donors are disproportionately coming from some of the pretty typical special interest industries, right? Law firms, for example, big real estate, healthcare industry giants. Beto O'Rourke is also a super rich dude. That's not a criticism, but it's just the reality that in the House of Representatives, there's 435 elected members of the House of Representatives. Beto O'Rourke is number 22 out of 435 in net worth. In other words, among a very rich group of people, members of the House of Representatives, Beto O'Rourke is in the top 5% richest members of that body. His primary endorsement back in 2016, not his general election endorsement, right? During the primary, he endorsed Hillary Clinton. Again, not the most progressive thing that a so-called progressive Democrat would do. And I've had this criticism of Elizabeth Warren as well. I'm not just choosing one or the other side to criticize for that. His view on health care is we should expand Obamacare, which you could argue is the practical way forward, but he's not ever indicated that he believes in some kind of healthcare for all system as the path forward, whether it's universal coverage, Medicare for all, or some other system. When it comes to education, I want to hear more from Beto O'Rourke about education because his wife is the director of a charter school, And at minimum, there might be a conflict of interest there when it comes to public education funding. So am I telling you not to vote for Beto O'Rourke in Texas? Of course not. There's one way right now, short of some kind of medical issue that Ted Cruz has, for Ted Cruz to be removed from the Senate in November of 2018, and it's if enough people vote for Beto O'Rourke. That is the path forward, and I think you should vote for Beto O'Rourke. But what I think is important, especially as we look at 2018 more broadly, but also 2020 and the next presidential election, whenever there's this sort of rise of a celebrity Democratic candidate, it very often becomes that this person is just a great progressive hero, when the truth is we're dealing with a pretty middle-of-the-road corporate Democrat in Beto O'Rourke. Now, I'm open to having my mind changed. I sound like Steven Crowder, I know, when I say this. I am saying vote for him. My perception, my understanding is this is a pretty moderate, rich corporate Democrat. Change my mind, right? I'm open to having my mind changed.
Well, maybe you need someone like Beto because Texas is still a red state. So if
Perfect.
you had someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, some progressive champion running there, they probably wouldn't win. They'd probably lose to Ted Cruz.
There is no question that in Texas, it's more than likely going to have to be someone like Beto O'Rourke, who, if we are ever going to see a takedown of someone like Ted Cruz in the historically red state of Texas, will be able to do it. I am not misguided about that for a second. What I think is important, though, is when nationally Democrats start looking to Beto O'Rourke, and I'm getting so wound up, I just punched my mic, and I apologize for that. We just got to simmer down a little bit, right? This is no progressive hero. He's a very wealthy corporate Democrat who has ties to a lot of the same usual suspect industries, with the caveat that he has said he's not accepting PAC money. If I'm off the rails, let me know. Write in, tweet me, go to our Reddit discussion forum, davidpakman.com/REDDIT, and I will correct the record and come and ask for an apology if I'm wrong and Beto O'Rourke really is a progressive hero.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
If you're in our audience, you know that I've been covering the Trump-Russia story on the program for a while. I've covered events related to Russian interference in the 2016 election, possible coordination between Russia and members of the Trump administration. It's news. It's worth discussing on a program that deals with American politics, and I've made every effort to cover it in a way that doesn't make unreasonable assumptions or where I act like I know things that we just don't yet know. In other words, I try to make clear what is fact, what is speculation, and what is circumstantial. And if you watch the show, you know that for a long time I've been getting emails from a contingent of the audience that questions a range of the topics that relate to Trump and Russia. What's my justification for believing this? What do I think about that? So I thought it would be good to sort of sort through and do a rundown of the facts regarding everything Trump-Russia and how all of this informs my outlook on the entire story. This is more or less a response to people who deny certain indisputable facts, but also people who say that certain speculations are totally baseless. So let's start by laying out 4 things that I solidly believe to be true. Number 1, Russia interfered in our election in 2016. That is undeniable. Whether they flipped the results is another story. Number 2, there are some currently known facts directly supporting the notion that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Certain facts already definitively tell us this for sure, but the evidence is limited at this time. Number 3, given an entire array of other facts about countless other matters, any reasonable person should be able to admit at this point that it would be miraculous if there turned out to be no other coordination between the Russian government and the Trump campaign in addition to what we already know. And number 4, and this might be the most important point, denialism about Trump-Russia by default should be put on hold until the investigations have concluded and the findings have gone public. Journalists and members of the public don't have the legal authority that Congress, the FBI, and other intelligence agencies have to dig for evidence. We can very reasonably assume that there is a ton of deeply relevant knowledge about all of this that's just not in the hands of the public yet, and claims that there was no collusion or that there is no evidence of collusion are meaningless as long as all that information is still behind closed doors. And by the same token, no one should make definitive pointed claims about there being collusion yet either, in the context that there is not yet enough evidence. All I can do is talk about what we know and give what I believe to be justified interpretations of each piece of the puzzle. So let's start with what we know, starting with Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. Amazingly, there are somehow still some people who deny or have doubts that Russia even interfered in the election at all, including our president. But there are some pretty obvious reasons why Trump wouldn't want to admit any of it. So let's start by recreating that timeline. In September of 2015, the FBI called the DNC to tell them that their servers had been compromised by hackers affiliated with the Russian government. And the FBI said it was the same group of Kremlin-connected hackers who had for years been hacking the White House and State Department, and the DNC basically blew off the warning. In April of 2016, the server attacks became more apparent to the DNC, and their top officials were alerted for the first time, and they hired private independent cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike to investigate, who also independently determined that the DNC was attacked by hackers affiliated with the Russian government. In June of 2016, the DNC told the public they were hacked by the Russian government, and the next day, an anonymous person online calling themselves Guccifer 2.0 came forward and said, no, CrowdStrike is wrong. It wasn't Russia who hacked the DNC. It was me, and I'm just a random Romanian guy with no connection to Russia. I hacked the DNC to expose the Illuminati. Guccifer also posted authentic DNC documents, which proves that Guccifer at some point had access to DNC servers or is affiliated with someone that did. And cybersecurity experts and U.S. intel have said that Guccifer was likely a false flag created by Russian intelligence to deflect blame. And this wouldn't be the first time that Russia has created a fake lone hacker to divert blame for their hacks. And Guccifer discredited themselves in a number of ways, which supports the notion that Guccifer is acting on behalf of the Russian government. There's reasonable justification for assuming that Guccifer is a Russian invention. But even if Guccifer is Romanian, and it happened that Guccifer was inside the DNC's computer systems at the same time as the Russians, Guccifer's identity doesn't change the conclusions of the U.S. intelligence and several private cybersecurity firms that the DNC was also hacked by Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear, two hacking groups known to be tied to the Kremlin and famous for hacking Russia's adversaries. So back to the timeline. Over the course of June 2016, CrowdStrike's conclusions that the DNC was hacked by those two Russian groups are corroborated by other private, independent cybersecurity firms, including ThreatConnect, SecureWorks, and Fidelis Cybersecurity. July of 2016, 3 days before the start of the Democratic National Convention, WikiLeaks publishes tens of thousands of hacked DNC emails. Guccifer said this was going to happen. The emails humiliate the Clinton campaign, humiliate the DNC, and lead to the resignation of the DNC's chair, CEO, CFO, and communications director. It is clear that those who were responsible for this were only interested in making the DNC look bad and hurting Hillary Clinton's chances of winning the election. Julian Assange has denied that Russia was his source for leaks, but Assange might not even know who gave him the documents. And let's keep in mind that Assange used to have his own TV show on Russian outlet RT. And we know that Assange has long disliked Hillary Clinton. And Assange was recently caught haphazardly offering opposition research on a Democratic U.S. senator to someone who was pretending to be Sean Hannity on Twitter. So it's no secret that both Russia and Julian Assange have it out for the Democratic Party. In October of 2016, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Defense released a joint statement. The U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations. We believe, based on the scope and sensitivity of these efforts, that only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities. Next month, in November, 2 days before Election Day, thousands of more hacked DNC emails were published, and clearly whoever coordinated the hacking and the publishing of the DNC emails chose to time things out in a way that would be most damaging to the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign. Also in November of 2016, NSA Director and Commander of the U.S. Cyber Command, Mike Rogers, blamed the Russian government and attributes motive. Quote, "There shouldn't be any doubt in anyone's mind this was a conscious effort by a nation-state to attempt to achieve a specific effect." In December of 2016, the CIA tells the Senate that it's quite clear that people connected to the Kremlin hacked the DNC and interfered with the 2016 election, specifically with the purpose of helping Donald Trump win. A week later, U.S. and foreign intelligence officials tell ABC News that Putin was personally involved in the DNC hacks and other efforts to interfere with the 2016 election. These anonymous U.S. and foreign officials say that they were directly involved in tracking the hacks. January 6, 2017, the CIA, FBI, and Office of the Director of National Intelligence release a joint public statement saying they've concluded with high confidence that the Russian government hacked DNC emails and published them through WikiLeaks with the goal of helping Trump get elected, and that all of this was directly ordered by Vladimir Putin. In February of this year, Trump's own Secretary of State tacitly admitted that Russia interfered in the 2016 election by hacking. So you can't just say, oh, it's all Obama's intel people who are manufacturing hysteria around Russian hacking. It wasn't just Obama-appointed people in intel making these claims before this anyway. And also, in February of this year, Jeanette Manfra, who's the head of cybersecurity at DHS, confirmed that not only did Russia target voting systems in 21 states, which we already knew, but that Russia succeeded in at least some of those instances. She said that these hacks, no doubt, came from the Russian government. Russia also recruited an army of trolls and bots to influence public opinion via social media, which is supported by a mountain of academic research, journalism, testimony in Congress, and criminal indictments. That's probably the least controversial truth in all of this, so I'm not even going to waste more time on that. Russia is well known for hacking and otherwise trying to interfere with the affairs of adversarial governments, political parties, and elections. Why wouldn't they try to do this here in the U.S. in 2016 in order to help a presidential candidate that has been conspicuously sympathetic to Russian interests at every stage of the election? You can say, I'm a shill for the Democratic Party or a shill for corporate media or whatever other nonsense you want to say. Many of the people who say those things about me may not be aware that I am constantly extremely critical of the DNC and the Democratic Party on this program. I do not defend the DNC and their corruption. I don't defend what was found in their leaked emails or their treatment of Bernie Sanders during the election. I come to you as someone without a dog in this fight, as someone who doesn't pull punches when it comes to Democrats and the DNC. And I will be the first to admit that outlets like MSNBC and the Huffington Post maybe are guilty of some of that. But what we've got to understand is that many Bernie Sanders supporters have a grudge against the DNC for their treatment of Bernie, so they want to believe that the email leaks were righteous and coordinated by good faith actors. I'm a Bernie supporter with some of those same grudges, but I'm not going to let that blind me from what the evidence points to, which is that Russia was responsible for hacking and leaking the DNC documents and emails. And totally understandably, many Trump fans also don't want to believe Russia hacked the DNC because they don't want to believe that Trump had an unfair advantage in the election, and they definitely don't want to believe that the Trump campaign may have had knowledge or involvement with Russian interference in the election. A plot by the U.S. intelligence community and the private cybersecurity industry and the press to falsely blame the hacks on Russia would be a much bigger and far less believable conspiracy than Russians hacking Democrats. Both Democratic and Republican members of Congress agree that Russia hacked the DNC and influenced the election in other ways. Republicans want to deny almost everything about Trump-Russia, but they've had a lot of trouble denying that. No one can ignore what motivations Russia would have for doing this. No one can ignore Russia's horrible relationship with the Obama administration. And regardless of whether there was Trump-Russia collusion, it's impossible to deny that Trump implicitly and explicitly was going to be a more pro-Russia president than Hillary Clinton. And Russia is almost certainly very interested in making the U.S. look stupid to the world, which, by the way, has been another result of Trump's victory. And Russia succeeded in making our electoral process seem vulnerable and disordered. They had every reason to try to tip the election in Trump's favor because it was a win-win-win for Russia. Let's pause there. Tomorrow, the conclusion to our investigation into what is the evidence of Trump-Russia collusion and Russian meddling so far.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I mentioned yesterday that the degree to which porn stars and prostitutes are involved in the Trump administration is starting to get a little bit weird, and it's only growing because now adult film star Stormy Daniels, who by all reasonable assessments had an affair with Donald Trump some years ago and was paid $130,000 in hush money not to talk about it, is now suing Donald Trump to formally void the non-disclosure agreement that she had with him. And in this lawsuit that she filed, she is alleging that the non-disclosure is invalid because Trump never actually signed it. And as the story goes, there was this document where Stormy Daniels had agreed not to disclose her intimate relationship with Trump. She was given $130,000. We've since found out that, yes, the $130,000 has been confirmed, and it came from Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohn, supposedly. Stormy Daniels signed this document. Michael Cohn, Trump's lawyer, signed the document, but Trump himself did not. And Stormy Daniels is saying that this means the non-disclosure is not valid because the parties to the agreement didn't sign it. Now, I read through the lawsuit. I want to give you my assessment of the strength of the legal claim in a second. I read through the lawsuit, and we're going to link to it on YouTube. It is endlessly fascinating. Number one, the lawsuit says that Daniels and her attorney believe that the reason Trump didn't sign it is because by not signing it later, if exactly this situation came up, Trump could say, I knew nothing about it. I never signed anything. You can't prove I knew about it, which is interesting because it's exactly what is going on. As far as the claims made about what material exists related to this alleged affair, if you look at the top of page 10 of the PDF, that is the entire lawsuit and some attached documents, there is something very, very compelling, which says, prior to entering into this agreement, PP came in, which is the pseudonym that Stormy Daniels is using in this document. PP came into possession of certain confidential information pertaining to DD, which is Donald Trump, as more fully defined below, only some of which is in tangible form, which includes but is not limited to, I hope you're sitting down right now, information, certain still images, and or text messages which were authored by or relate to DD, meaning Donald Trump. If we can get our hands on those at some point, and hopefully if this non-disclosure agreement is at some point determined to be null and void, she can do whatever she wants with those text messages and photographs that relate directly to or were created by Donald Trump. Netflix must be planning a series based around this by now, right? I mean, how could they not be? How unbelievable is it that being sued by the porn star that you had an affair with and paid off for her silence is only the fourth or fifth biggest scandal of the week that Donald Trump is dealing with at this time. And now I want to get to the legal part of this, okay? It's not legally cut and dry that because Trump didn't physically sign it, the agreement is invalid. I've read some legal opinions that say it's a good case. Trump didn't sign it. Therefore, the agreement never really went into force. And the payment, which was supposedly just made by Michael Cohen personally, arguably also doesn't really bind Stormy Daniels into the agreement. The counterpoint to that would be, well, hold on a second. Stormy Daniels signed it. She agreed to receive the $130,000, and she did receive the $130,000. And one could make the case that Michael Cohen, as Trump's counsel, was signing on his behalf, and therefore Trump's actual signature on this thing is not needed. I don't know the answer. I don't know ultimately what will happen. But what I can tell you is that either way, this can become a major story, because if Trump says, well, let me sign it right now in order to enforce the NDA, that is an admission that Trump knows exactly what this is all about, and that in and of itself becomes the news story. And if instead it's determined that she can say whatever she wants because Trump didn't sign it, then her story is very quickly going to become the news story. Either way, we seem to be going in the direction where someday we will eventually get the full story here, and I think that that's a very good thing. The Maryland Senate has passed a bill that would mandate that to be on the ballot for the presidential election in Maryland, a candidate must release their tax returns. So obviously this relates to Trump. Donald Trump was the first candidate in decades not to release his personal tax returns during the 2016 election. Republicans are against this bill because they say it unfairly targets Trump and it's childish. Most Democrats are in favor of it, but it's not the law yet because the Maryland House of Representatives still needs to vote in favor. It is controlled by a Democratic majority, so that might happen. But then you need the Republican governor of Maryland to sign it into law, and we don't know if that's going to happen. Other states that have tried this are New Jersey and California. Both failed due to vetoes. And Jerry Brown, the Democratic governor of California, actually said he was vetoing it because of a sort of slippery slope argument. He said, if now we're saying we are adding to the list of requirements to run for president that you need to disclose 5 years of tax returns, then what about saying you've also got to disclose 5 years of health records? Or if you're going to do that, then what about all of your elementary school grades or whatever? And generally speaking, I'm against slippery slope arguments. There is a potential constitutional issue here, which is you might be unduly burdening the requirements for president by adding restrictions. And of course, I'm not a constitutional attorney. I know many people watch the show. They say, David, you strike me like you are a constitutional law attorney. I'm not, let me be clear. But that is a possibility here. I actually think that there's a different path that I would take here. Whether or not we accept the slippery slope argument on this, which is requiring tax returns, could say, be a pretext to require some other thing. What about we have circumstances that voters don't allow someone who doesn't have their tax returns made public to win the primary, right? I think the better solution is the one I've been talking about since the election, and it's people voting, right? If people go and vote and voters in primaries refuse to select a candidate that doesn't release their tax returns, then that candidate shouldn't win. And at every time we talk about something like this, we really get down to it. And it's if people just voted and voted in a way that made sense, we wouldn't need to have debates about the constitutionality of requiring tax returns to be released by presidential candidates. It would be much more simple. That's the path I favor, although good for Maryland for doing this. I hope it does pass. Although remember, Trump didn't and doesn't need Maryland to win the presidency of the United States. And if it's only Maryland that does it, and even if it's Maryland and New York and New Jersey and California that do it, and Trump doesn't appear on the ballots there, it still wouldn't have impacted him in the 2016 election. We've got a voicemail. The voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I've been getting hit hard over the last couple of weeks for how I pronounce things. Earlier this week, I believe it was, maybe late last week, a caller said that a very cunning linguist said that I pronounced the word new incorrectly, that it should be pronounced only new, not new. And of course, we looked it up and both are accepted pronunciations. Here is another voicemail about how I have completely incorrectly pronounced yet another word.
Hi, David. This is Ann calling from Wisconsin.
Right.
I just wanted to let you know I enjoyed your segment on Carl Icahn and potentially insider trading regarding the selling off of his stock from the Manitowoc Company. But I have to admit I was a bit distracted by your pronunciation of Manitowoc. Being a local here, I can tell you that the correct pronunciation is not Manitowoc, as you were using, but Manitowoc.
Right.
It is the Manitowoc Company. Thought you might be interested in hearing that or knowing that. Anyways, keep up the great work, and I very much look forward to your shows. Thank you, David. Bye-bye.
Listen, I don't mind this. Like, I have no problem being corrected on pronunciations. I mean, in the end, I can always go back to English is my second language, and I'm doing the best I can here to pronounce things. I've been corrected that it's not Nevada, it's Nevada. It's not Hawaii.
Oregon. It's Oregon.
Oh, that one I didn't know. Okay, well, as of 30 seconds, as of 5 seconds ago, I've been corrected on that one. It's not Hawaii, it's Hawaii. It is not Manitowoc. It's, did you say Manitowoc?
I don't even remember. This city has a population of 33,000 people.
That's legit.
They should just be glad that we're mentioning them.
Well, I know it's like, and it's not an insult to Manitowoc. It's not a place that people nationally would necessarily be aware of. So I think it's understandable that I might not pronounce it correctly, but I stand corrected and I appreciate it. And any new corrections that people want to send in, I'm glad to receive. So thank you. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about what's going on in Texas with Democratic voters. We'll talk about protecting immigrants in California. We will talk about the oldest message in a bottle that has been found and much more. Get access to the bonus show at davidpakman.com/membership or at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.